the magic that came out of this process for me was that it allowed me to kind of center myself, root myself to the ground of who I am and where I am, and kind of really reflect on the most important and or interesting influences or resources that I want to draw on as a person in this world. And it was a great exercise because I would have never have thought about many of these things on this page. So what we're looking at here is a bunch of images that I've got to illustrate various things that I feel are important to me. They might be values, they might be something a bit more superficial than that, like a TV show or just an event that happened in my life. But starting from I'll talk you through it and then it'll give you a bit more context. So starting from the top left, we've got the screenshot of a video game, Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. This was the first video game that I got that was like 3D graphics. I think it was the N64, I think. But the game itself, it was the first game that I'd ever played. I think they're quite common now, known as like um, role player games, RPGs. But it was what I loved about this game was you had this character, Zelda, that you controlled, but the world that she inhabited was like so expansive. I'd never experienced anything like it in a game before. It felt to me like you had ultimate freedom to go wherever you wanted to go. And you had this horse called Epona that wasn't always with you, but if you wanted to get the horse, you had to play this musical instrument, this ocarina, in a certain way, which of course you had to use the remote control to do. And it was quite difficult to do. So sometimes I couldn't play the flute in the right way and I couldn't call this horse. And it was really frustrating. But then on the occasions when I could, the horse would come and it would give me this new freedom to kind of make progress through this massive world much faster. And it was just, I never got to experience all of it. And it felt to me like the closest thing to um, freedom on a sort of, there was a very transcendental level of freedom within the game that I'd never experienced before. So that's why that's there. Again, that was one of those things that if you'd have asked me to write down a list of influences, I would never have thought of. But there was something about putting a visual dream board together that made me think of Zelda, which is interesting. Next to her, you've got David Brent. He's on there because no comedian, no comedy has ever influenced me and my Sheffield friends more than Ricky Gervais and specifically The Office, the British version of The Office. So he's on there because, like, even today, decades after we watched that for the first time, me and my friends, our sense of humor is still completely defined and characterized by Brentisms and David Brent style jokes. So I think that's a big influence for me. And just on a personal note, I'm trying to, in my writing that I'm publishing at the New Workday is still quite serious. And I think it's because I'm a fledgling writer and I'm still trying to, I'm developing and I suppose I'm anxious that I'm not good enough yet. And therefore I'm trying to impress people. And it means that it's coming across a bit too serious. And I've had feedback from friends that I need to lighten up a bit, include more jokes, and maybe just not take myself so seriously. So David Brent's a really important character on my dream board at the moment. I want to inject more lightheartedness and play into my writing, into my work generally. Then on the right over there, you've got this big image of sort of key points of interest around the world and like big, big ritzy monuments and interesting places to travel. That to me just represents my love of travel and my love of adventure. So that's why that image is there. Bottom left, this harks way back to when I was a kid. I've heard somebody say before that like the thing that you were first interested in as a really, really young kid is often the thing that you should be doing when you're an adult. And I like this idea that I've heard elsewhere of the job of, or that sort of like the job of childhood is to grow into an adult and expand out into the world, and then the job of adulthood is to retreat back into your childlike body and kind of face mortality, but also face your childhood vision of what the world should be like. And that was quite nice. And this picture on the bottom left here, I was obsessed with drawing contraptions, silly little pointless contraptions. I just used to draw and draw and draw and draw these things that did silly things that were banal and ridiculous. And this, it turns out, I only found this out later as an adult. There's an artist, forgotten his name, Heath Robinson, who used to do this. And I definitely wasn't exposed to any Heath Robinson stuff as a kid, but it was just a natural urge I had to like draw these weird contraptions. So this is I think this is a wart pulling chair. So it's a simple device for removing a wart from the top of the head. So he pulls on this lever, it activates that pulley, all these things happen, and it pulls off a wart from the top of his head. And he's got tons and tons of these things. And I have no idea why I had a childhood interest in them. And I still do as an adult, but I don't really know what to do with it. So it's interesting. I'm not sure what it means, but it's there and it's important to me. Bottom center, you've got match of the day. All I'll say about that is that like watching football, Premier League football is still the most relaxing thing I can do with myself. It's incredibly relaxing for me. It's one of the only times I can really switch off my brain. But at the same time, I feel as if something's been achieved. I have a lot of similarities between travel, writing, and football. I feel like in each case, there's a kind of breakthrough being made, a breakthrough into the unknown. With writing, I'm exploring the page to try to make intellectual breakthroughs with ideas. When I'm watching football, I'm seeing the ball go into the back of the net, and I'm seeing attacking players breach the defensive line. And then with writing, travel, and football, they all represent breakthroughs, very scintillating breakthroughs of some kind of barrier for me. So that's there. Bottom right, I know I'm going on a bit, so I'll try and hurry up. Bottom right, that is a floor to ceiling, wall to wall row of shelves that I built in our flat in London. For years, I don't know why, but I had this dream of like building some shelves from scratch and not knowing how to do it, but just figuring it out on my own. And I did it. And it was, we did it during the pandemic. We got to renovate our flat during the pandemic. And so I rented a circular saw and I got all these toys and I got to just do it on my own for like 3 weeks or something. And it was one of the most satisfying projects I've ever done in my life. And it worked and it ended really well and they looked really neat and they made a great addition to the room. And actually we learned by building them that shelves actually serve a great purpose because, as you know, they look great, but also they get shit off the floor and they create more floor space because you can store so much on shelves. So it actually ended up creating more space, which was like a nice accident. And then finally, I'll finish by saying the middle image is me. I was at art school, and this is to my point about art school changing my life and giving me confidence and just like momentum and air in my wings. I randomly applied for a random competition that someone sent me. DocFest is a documentary film festival. It's an international festival, but it's held in Sheffield every year. And one of my mates sent me a call out that they'd found and DocFest, the company, were looking for a new artist to design and produce the awards trophies for all of their winners. It's like the Oscars of the documentary film world. And I, on a whim, on just feeling confident and on top of my game at art school, decided to apply for it. And I won the competition and I designed the award trophies for 2 years for DocFest. And that's me proudly and slightly shyly like standing between all the winners of that particular year. And that's just a very proud moment for me. Not just because I won it and it was an awesome project, but because like it really showed me that like you've got to be in it to win it, you know, and it's worth applying for that residency. It's worth putting in an application for that funding. It's worth it because they've got to give it to someone and it might just be you. And so I love that image because it's a reminder of to aim high and go for it. So that's my dream board. I don't think there are any rules about designing this. It's like whatever feels right to you, whatever gets your blood flowing, gets you excited, and whatever you think will be a useful and or interesting resource or nutrient that you can draw on in your project, whatever that is.